I still remember the way my hands shook that afternoon, the way the sunlight seemed almost cruel as it stretched across the street I had once called home. My name is Jasmine Rojas. I was 20 years old, a pre-law student, a daughter who thought she had done everything right. I had just driven 4 hours from my university to Bakersfield for spring break, imagining the comfort of my childhood room, my mother's cooking, maybe even a rare smile from my father. Instead, I found an empty house. The windows were stripped bare, no curtains, no furniture, no trace of the life that had raised me. A bold for sale sign pierced the lawn like a dagger. And on the porch, 3 black garbage bags, sagging heavy, waiting like unwanted guests. When I knelt down and tore one open, I saw my clothes, my books, and a broken frame with a family photo inside. 3 smiling faces stared back at me, the people who had just erased me. I called my uncle first because I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. He answered reluctantly, his voice already loaded with something I couldn't name. "Your parents moved last week," he said. "Didn't they tell you?" The words landed like stone in my stomach. "No," I whispered, choking on the lump rising in my throat. "They didn't tell me anything." My father's voice on the phone minutes later was flat, almost cold. "We moved. You're an adult now, deal with it." Then the line went dead. Just like that, the bridge between us was cut. I called again and again, straight to voicemail. My mother's phone, no answer. My younger brother's silence. I stood there under the fading sun, staring at the maple tree my father and I had planted when I was 8, its branches reaching toward a home that was no longer mine. I thought of everything I had sacrificed. I had studied while others partied. I had worked part-time jobs sending home part of my scholarship money every month. I had held on to a 3.9 GPA in pre-law. I had been the responsible one, the quiet one, the daughter who never gave them trouble. And my reward was 3 garbage bags and a locked door. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I loaded those bags into my car and checked into a cheap motel. The scratchy bedspread became my makeshift home. I laid out what I had salvaged: a few textbooks, some winter clothes, that broken frame with a photo of all of us at the beach. Everyone smiling, everyone a liar. That night, staring at the cracked ceiling, I made a decision. If they wanted to erase me, I would return the favor. I would cut ties. I would build a life they could never touch, something so unshakable that even their betrayal couldn't undo it. It felt almost surreal because my entire life had been built around one mantra: family first. My parents came from Mexico with nothing. My father worked double shifts at a manufacturing plant. My mother cleaned houses. They reminded us every day we gave up everything so you could have more. I believed them. I believed education was my ticket. I lived by their sacrifices. But apparently I was disposable. The irony was sharp. My brother Gabriel, the one who skipped classes, got caught stealing, who lived half his life behind a game controller. He was still by their side, still the protected son, still worthy of their shelter. Me, the daughter who obeyed, who excelled, who kept the family name clean, I was the one left on the curb. When I finally broke down, it wasn't with them. It was with Professor Wilkins, my constitutional law instructor, the woman who had quietly become a mentor. I called her, my voice cracking for the first time. She didn't hesitate. She gave me a room in her house, a key, and more importantly, the kind of care my own parents had denied me. From her Victorian home filled with books and cats, I started piecing myself back together. That spring break wasn't rest, it was resolve. Professor Wilkins had connected me to a summer legal internship at Riverton Law Partners. They specialized in housing discrimination cases, and I threw myself into it like my life depended on it. Maybe it did. I remember my supervisor, Eleanor Grayson, watching me with quiet surprise as I listened to a young mother who had been evicted. When the woman left, Eleanor told me, "You have something rare, Jasmine, you actually listen." Her words stayed with me. I began assisting with intake interviews, hearing story after story of families thrown out by greedy landlords, of students tricked by predatory leases, of elderly tenants facing impossible rent hikes. Every story echoed my own in some way. Their displacement was my displacement. Their betrayal was my betrayal. And so I began to dream. If I could not have my family, maybe I could build something different, something bigger than myself. A new kind of family made of people who understood what it was like to be thrown away. I didn't know then just how much that decision would change everything. The work at Riverton consumed me, but in the best way. I wasn't just filling time. I was rebuilding meaning from the wreckage my family had left behind. Every intake form, every desperate client who sat across from me was a reminder that I wasn't alone in being discarded. And every time we fought back against an unjust landlord or secured housing for a student, I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of my own dignity. But beneath that drive was something darker: anger. The kind that simmers just below the surface, fueling you even when you think you've made peace. I had sworn to myself that I would never cry for them, never beg for answers. And yet some nights, lying awake in Professor Wilkins' guest room, I would catch myself staring at that broken picture frame from the garbage bag, wondering what exactly I had done to be so easily erased. Eleanor noticed it, of course. She always seemed to see right through me. One evening, after a brutal day interviewing 3 families evicted from the same complex, I stayed late, drowning in case notes. She leaned against the doorframe, her silhouette framed by the glow of the office lights. "The system is broken," she said gently. "It's not just broken," I replied, voice shaking. "It's cruel. 2 weeks in a motel isn't enough for anyone. These people will end up homeless." She studied me for a long moment. "So what are you going to do about it?" Her question haunted me. What could I, a second-year pre-law student, do? But the universe has a strange way of answering. Days later, I sat in a required university financial aid seminar, half listening as the presenter droned about grants and scholarships. Then my ears caught on something: social innovation grants seed money for projects addressing community needs. It felt like lightning. I spent 3 nights drafting a proposal, my laptop glowing into the early hours. I called it the Safe Space Initiative, a program to help students and low-income families fight wrongful evictions. Eleanor guided me through the legal scaffolding. Professor Wilkins fine-tuned the language. When I hit submit, my heart pounded, as if I'd just placed my soul into an envelope. 6 months had passed since that day on the porch when the calls began. At first, just a voicemail from my father. "Your mother is worried, call us." His tone wasn't remorseful. It was commanding, like I was still a child who owed them obedience. I didn't respond. 3 days later, another voicemail, this time sharper. "This silent treatment is childish. We're your family." Family. That word felt like a knife. The calls multiplied: my father, my mother, sometimes even Gabriel. Sometimes pleading, sometimes scolding. Never apologizing. Never once admitting what they had done. By the time the university emailed me back with the subject line, "Congratulations, Safe Space Initiative awarded, $25,000 grant." I had made my choice. I celebrated with Eleanor and Professor Wilkins. They toasted me with tea and cheap champagne, the kind of celebration I used to dream my parents would give me. I didn't tell my family I didn't need them. The program took off faster than I could have imagined. We set up in a converted storage room at Riverton. 2 volunteer paralegals joined me along with rotating law students earning clinical hours. In just a month, we had helped over 20 students keep their housing. The work was exhausting, but it filled a void in me I hadn't realized could be filled. Meanwhile, the calls from my parents grew more desperate. Aunts and uncles texted me trying to guilt me into answering. "Your mother cries every night. Whatever happened, can't you forgive them?" Forgiveness requires acknowledgement, and they had given me none. Then came the day my mother's voice reached me, in a place I had considered untouchable, my office. I had just finished counseling a sophomore named Devin who'd come back from winter break to find his landlord had rented his room to someone else. As I was about to outline his legal options, the phone rang. I picked up, professional as ever. "Safe Space Initiative, this is Jasmine." There was silence, then a voice that made my stomach drop. "Jasmine, is that you?" "My mother." For a moment I froze. "How did you get this number?" "It's on your website," she answered softly. "Why haven't you called us back?" "We've been worried sick." I motioned for Devin to step outside, my hand trembling as I covered the receiver. When I returned to the call, I forced my voice steady. "This is my workplace. Please don't call here again." "We're your parents," she pleaded. "We have the right." "No," I snapped, my voice breaking for the first time. "You lost that right when you put my life into garbage bags. You lost that right when you left without a word." She broke then, her voice cracking. "We had financial troubles. The house was being foreclosed. Your father, his pride, wouldn't let us tell you. We were ashamed." The words stopped me cold. Foreclosure, financial troubles. None of this had ever been mentioned. I had been sending them money every month. If they were struggling, why hadn't they told me? For a second, my anger faltered. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe there was some explanation other than cruelty. But the call ended with me setting the receiver down, my hands trembling. That night, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I'd been wrong. If maybe, just maybe, they hadn't abandoned me out of malice but desperation. It was a dangerous seed of doubt, and it would soon lead me to a truth far more devastating than anything I had imagined. The days after that phone call felt heavy. I couldn't shake my mother's words: foreclosure, financial troubles, shame. They looped in my mind as if repeating them might make them more believable. Part of me wanted to cling to the possibility that their abandonment wasn't pure cruelty, that maybe my father's pride had twisted their choices, that maybe my mother had been caught in his silence. But Eleanor's words kept echoing: two reasons and excuses aren't the same thing, and my parents had made a choice to leave me standing in front of an empty house, clutching garbage bags filled with the remnants of my life. Still, that seed of doubt pushed me to do something I had resisted for months. I searched for them online. It took minutes, not hours. There they were, smiling in a cheerful Facebook post, standing in front of a new house, my brother Gabriel flashing a peace sign. The caption read, "New beginnings. So blessed." The picture was dated just 3 weeks after they had moved. No foreclosure, no financial ruin, no desperation. Just a decision to leave me behind and start over without me. I stared at that post until my vision blurred. My chest ached with a grief that felt worse than rage. It was one thing to believe they had abandoned me out of necessity. It was another to realize they had simply chosen not to include me in their new life. The unanswered calls piled up like snowdrifts. 120, 150, 200. My father's voice shifted from commanding to pleading, my mother's from guilt to desperation. Sometimes they left mundane updates as if I had been part of their conversations all along. Gabriel got into community college. He's studying computer programming. The neighbors brought tamales, not as good as your mother's, but they're kind. It made me sick. They were building a new life, new connections, while I was still stitching myself back together from the wound they had carved into me. Meanwhile, Safe Space Initiative was growing faster than I could manage. A local news station ran a feature on us, then the university newspaper followed with a glowing profile. Suddenly we were flooded with more cases than we had resources for. Eleanor suggested applying for a major grant through the Watkins Foundation, enough money to hire staff, rent real offices, and expand beyond the university. I poured myself into that application. Weeks of drafting, redrafting, collecting testimonials, building data. 47 pages that carried not just the program's vision, but my own heart, my own survival story hidden between the lines. When I submitted it, I felt like I was laying my future bare. 2 days later, a call came, not from the foundation, but from someone I hadn't expected. Jasmine. The voice was hesitant, familiar. "Mrs. Hernandez, our old neighbor." My chest tightened. "Yes, I hope it's okay," I called. "Your brother gave me your number. He said you wouldn't answer if it came from your parents." I stiffened. "If this is about reconnecting—" No, she interrupted. "It's about the house. Someone broke in last night. Police think they were looking for valuables, but it's empty now. Your father asked me to check to see if maybe you had come back. But—" her voice trailed off. "There's something else. The intruder left something behind. An envelope, with your name on it." My pulse quickened. "What does it say?" "I haven't opened it," she said. "But it looks official, from a law firm. Official mail addressed to me. At the house where I no longer lived, My hands trembled as I asked her to open it. I listened as paper tore, then silence stretched across the line. "It's about your grandmother's estate," she said finally. "Your maternal grandmother in Mexico." I blinked. "My grandmother? She died when I was 13. "Yes, but this says you've inherited property in Oaxaca. And Jasmine, there's a bank statement. It shows a balance of over $400,000. The room spun. I clutched the desk to steady myself. That can't be right. She lived simply. She never had that kind of money. The letter says the property was developed after her death resort condominiums. Your portion is the proceeds from 2 units sold. I scribbled down the law firm's information as Mrs. Hernandez dictated it, my hand shaking. When was this finalized? I asked. She shuffled papers. Last March. 1 month before my parents had abandoned me. The timing sliced me open. They had known all along. I contacted the firm directly. They confirmed everything. The inheritance was real, the money was mine, and notification had been sent to my parents as my legal guardians when I was 19. They had hidden it. They had chosen to leave me behind knowing this legacy was coming. I told Professor Wilkins over dinner, the words spilling out like venom. They knew about the inheritance. They left me anyway. Probably thought they deserved it more than I did. She set her fork down, her eyes heavy with sorrow. Perhaps. Or maybe they thought if they controlled when you found out, they could keep you dependent, make you grateful. I pushed my plate away, my stomach churning. Or maybe they never planned to tell me at all. The inheritance hit my account 3 days before the Watkins Foundation presentation. For the first time since that day on the porch, I felt untethered from them, not just emotionally, but financially. I had security they could never take from me. And yet the timing was cruel. Because even as I was about to step into the most important presentation of my career, they would find a way to insert themselves back into my life. The Watkins Foundation presentation was supposed to be the defining moment of my young career. Eleanor and I arrived at their sleek downtown offices armed with binders, data, and the kind of quiet determination that only comes when you've built something out of ashes. Our proposal requested $300,000 over 3 years, enough to turn Safe Space from a scrappy student initiative into a fully fledged nonprofit. I had practiced my speech 100 times. Focus on the human stories, Eleanor reminded me. Show them how Safe Space changes lives. We were escorted into a polished boardroom where 8 members sat in silence, their faces serious but not unkind. William Watkins himself, a man whose name carried weight in philanthropy, rose to greet us. "We've been impressed by your written proposal," he said. "Show us why Safe Space deserves our support." And I did. I told them about Devin, the sophomore whose landlord had rented his room out illegally, about the single mother who faced eviction with 2 toddlers, about the students who balanced work, school, and the looming threat of homelessness. Eleanor added legal context, explaining how our model filled gaps that traditional services overlooked. For 20 minutes, the words flowed from me with conviction, and then the door opened. A foundation assistant entered, whispered to Mr. Watkins, and he looked at me with discomfort. "Ms. Rojas, there are some people here claiming to be your family. They say it's urgent." My chest tightened. My family. After months of unanswered calls, they had found me here now at the most important moment of my life. "Shall we ask them to wait?" Mr. Watkins offered. I steadied myself. "Please tell them I'll speak with them after the presentation. This is too important to interrupt." Inside, my mind was racing. Of course they would appear now. Of course they would try to reclaim a place in my life at the very moment I stood on the brink of independence. I finished the presentation almost on autopilot, my voice steady even as my pulse thundered. The board asked questions. I answered with practiced calm. When we finally closed, they promised a decision within 2 weeks. Eleanor squeezed my arm as we packed up. "You were excellent," she whispered, "especially under the circumstances." But I felt hollow, because outside that boardroom my ghosts were waiting. In the reception area, I saw them, my mother rising to her feet, eyes shimmering with hope and fear. My father seated stiffly, his expression guarded. Gabriel hovering awkwardly between them, taller now, older, but still the boy I remembered. "Jasmine," my mother said softly, "we need to talk." Eleanor gave my shoulder a squeeze. Call me later, she murmured, leaving me to face them alone. I stood frozen for a moment, then managed. Why are you here? How did you even find me? We saw the newspaper article about Safe Space, my mother admitted. It mentioned the Watkins presentation. We've been trying to reach you for months. I'm aware, I said coldly. 247 missed calls is hard to overlook. My father finally stood, his voice sharp. This has gone on long enough. You're being childish. A bitter laugh escaped me. Childish. You abandoned me. You sold our house, left my belongings in garbage bags on the porch. And I'm childish. We made a mistake, my mother whispered, tears in her eyes. We want to make it right. Now, I demanded, after a year, after I rebuilt everything without you. Gabriel shifted uncomfortably. Just hear them out, Jazz. I turned to him, then back to my parents. I know about the inheritance, I said flatly. Is that why you're suddenly interested in reconciliation? Because the money came through? My father's face darkened. You've always been so quick to judge. And you've always been so quick to discard, I shot back. You knew about my grandmother's estate last March. You kept it from me, then threw me away. My mother's eyes widened. You know, I know everything I said. My voice was calm, but my hands trembled. So tell me, what do you want now? We moved to a coffee shop nearby, a neutral ground. I sat across from them, a physical and emotional distance I intended to keep. My mother's hands wrapped around an untouched cup of coffee. We were ashamed, she said. Your father lost his job. The foreclosure. There was no foreclosure, I cut her off. I saw the Facebook post. A new house. Smiles. Blessings. You weren't ruined. You just decided I wasn't part of the life you wanted anymore. Her face crumpled. My father tried to interject, but I silenced him with a glare. You left me. You lied. And when you realized the money couldn't be hidden forever, you came running back. Jasmine, please, Gabriel said quietly. They know they made a mistake. They want to fix it. I looked at him, the brother who had always been shielded, always excused. He seemed older now, guilt etched in his face. But guilt wasn't enough. I've built a new life, I said finally. With people who value me, who don't measure my worth by how much they can take from me. That's my family now. We're still your family, my father insisted, his jaw set. I met his gaze steadily. Family doesn't put your belongings in garbage bags. I rose, placing cash on the table to cover our untouched drinks. I don't need closure. I don't need explanations. If you truly want to make amends, start by respecting my boundaries. That's all I'll ask. And then I walked away. For the first time since that day on the porch, I felt something powerful, not rage, not grief, but strength. I had faced them on my own terms. I had chosen myself. The next morning, the call came. The Watkins Foundation had awarded Safe Space the full grant with an additional $50,000 for operations. Hours later, a national news outlet asked to feature us in a segment on innovative approaches to housing justice. When the story aired weeks later, it reached millions, including, I later learned, my parents. They never called again. When the segment aired on national television, I sat alone in my small apartment, the screen glowing with faces of the people Safe Space had helped. A young mother holding her daughter, a student smiling nervously as he described how we fought for his right to keep his dorm room, an elderly tenant who said through tears, Jasmine gave me my home back. It was surreal. For so long, I had been the one clinging to the edge of belonging, desperate for scraps of love from the people who were supposed to be my family. And now strangers were calling me their lifeline, their advocate, their hope. I thought about my parents, about the way my father's voice had sounded that day on the phone, flat, dismissive. You're an adult now. Deal with it. About my mother's silence, her complicity, her sudden tears when the inheritance became unavoidable. About Gabriel's awkward half-apologies. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate would have meant they still had power over me. What I felt instead was something quieter, harder to define. A kind of grief for what never was and never would be again. Because family, I realized, is not blood. It's not a last name or shared memories or forced traditions. Family is chosen. Family is built. Family is the people who stay when it would be easier to leave. And I had built mine. In Eleanor, who pushed me to turn my pain into purpose. In Professor Wilkins, who gave me shelter when I had none. In the clients who trusted me with their stories, and in the students and volunteers who poured their energy into making Safe Space real. That was my family. That was my future. The inheritance sat in my account untouched, a reminder of both betrayal and possibility. I didn't need it to validate me. I didn't need it to define me. But one day, I knew I would use it to expand safe space even further, to make sure no one else would stand outside a home they thought was theirs, only to find it stripped bare, their life reduced to garbage bags. Sometimes late at night, I would still dream of that house, of the maple tree swaying in the Bakersfield sun, of walking up the porch steps and hearing laughter spill out the front door. In those dreams, I was always part of it, always welcomed, always loved. But then I would wake up, and the truth would return. That home, that family was gone, and maybe it had never truly existed in the way I had once believed. The lesson was bitter, but it was mine. Sometimes the people you love the most will betray you in ways you never imagined. Sometimes the people you trust will abandon you without warning. And sometimes the only revenge worth taking is to thrive anyway. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their approval. I had built a life without them, and in doing so, I had proven something to myself that I was enough. So when I think back now to that day, I stood in front of my childhood home with the sun setting behind me, garbage bags at my feet, phone cold in my hand, after my father's final words. I don't see an ending anymore. I see a beginning, and maybe that's the truest kind of karma. Not that they lost me, but that I found myself. If you've ever been abandoned, betrayed, or left behind, know this: you are not broken. You can build new connections, new strength, new family. The pain may shape you, but it doesn't have to define you. And if my story resonates with you, I hope you'll join me here. Share your story in the comments. Like this video if you believe in turning pain into purpose. Subscribe to hear more stories like mine, stories of survival, betrayal, and the quiet strength that follows. Because none of us should ever have to face it alone. Thank you for listening to mine.